Okay, good evening, everyone, or good afternoon in some places. First, we said that laparoscopic surgeries are ideal for rural patients. So, the reason is that laparoscopic surgeries are probably ideal for rural patients because the recovery is fast and they can go back to work quite quickly. And in rural areas, the facilities available limited. So quick turnover helps quite a bit in providing them surgical care. And again, as we said, the main drawback of having laparoscopic surgeries in rural areas is that we don't have people to give general anesthesia. And it's a logistic nightmare to get gases there, both for surgery and for anesthesia. And that is the reason that we started looking actively for some way of doing these laparoscopic surgeries under spinal anesthesia. And we had done, the slide shows, we had done quite a variety of these surgeries over the time under spinal anesthesia. So today, our primary focus is to look at how these gasless surgeries evolved. Some people might think that it's been brand new thing, maybe 10, 20 years. But if you read the history of laparoscopic surgeries, it's almost 70, 80 years since people started doing surgeries with what we now know as laparoscopic surgeries. And the pioneers had a hard time because they didn't have the necessary equipment and very primitive equipment and so on. But it's only in the 80s laparoscopy surgery became a standard surgical procedures, and many countries started doing them. Next slide actually shows a list of the development which happened in the 90s, because in the 80s when laparoscopy surgery started, people realized that there are disadvantages by using regular carbon dioxide for insufflation because it causes physiological changes. What it does is that the anesthesiologists don't like it because it causes several changes in the body which they need to take care. Of course, many of the Western countries had no problem with the equipment and gases, and those are the things that we were talking about earlier. But then they were concerned about these physiological changes in patients who are not fully fit for surgery, or surgeries which took a long time, 1 hour, 2 hours and more. Then these changes become significant. And also definite but a small number of complications reported because of the port insertions and the other things which people who joined earlier saw a list of about 16, 17 complications which are there because of traditional or conventional laparoscopic surgeries. And that is the reason why people started looking for alternatives. And in the 90s, a lot of, if you look at this table, there are a lot of development in trying to do laparoscopic surgery without gas. So we'll go one by one to see what was the problem and why didn't it become very popular. The first equipment that, actually Dr. Hashimoto from Japan, he is considered the father of gasless laparoscopic surgeries. This is if you look at the slide, that is the equipment that he had, which is a fairly complicated one. It has a hole in the center and a lot of wires hanging around here and there. So you'd realize that operating is a little difficult with so many wires all around the place. But then he understood the big advantages which are there with the laparoscopic surgeries. Then came a series of development which happened over the years, starting from Srikande's device in India, Damini device, Tintara device, and so on. These basically what happened was they had a pole which or a chain or something which went inside the abdomen, and then it lifted the abdominal wall. So in essentially what happened was there is what we call a tenting. If you look at the three devices, you'll see what I mean by it just lifts the center of where we need. And then the visibility is only just underneath where the device is lifting. But obviously the gases, they distance the abdomen quite wide and you have a good vision. But these exposure will be obviously inadequate. So then to solve that problem, people started using mechanized or motorized devices. So here what happens is that even though there is a tenting, you can sort of move the device which is lifting the abdominal wall a little bit here and there. And that give a little more additional exposure. But again, you should realize that operating under these sort of conditions were not ideal, were difficult. So these are all experiences which are from single centers. It is not widely accepted like the standard laparoscopic surgeries, the publications were from single centers. And they were primarily used for patients who are not really fit for traditional laparoscopic surgeries. Then the next development was again from India, a doctor called Dakshinamurthy in South India. He developed a device which is like a V-shaped device, which lifted, and he was doing primarily using it for hysterectomies. So here what happens is that unfortunately the problem with this is that you need to make a much larger opening in the near the umbilicus, and then it spreads and then lifts the abdominal wall. So here it is be much bigger development because what it offered was almost twice as much exposure as the earlier devices that we talked about, but still had these limitations of exposure. So then Western companies started making these sort of Laparofan and other devices, which was not really bulky at the joint. So, and you didn't need a much bigger incision. So this is the next set of development to improve the access or visibility or how we can, you need some space for operating. Then as with the previous equipment that caused stenting, then motorized devices came into existence for these sort of Laparofan devices, where again you can rotate the devices with the mechanized motors to add to the ease of looking at the various things. But the main base, and again, then the next concept was that instead of one place or two places, if you have lifting devices in multiple places, then the exposure would improve. And that was the basis for keyless abdominal rope lifting device. So this had lifts placed in multiple places in the abdominal wall, and definitely it offered a much better exposure. But again, the problem was that the space was inadequate, the exposure was inadequate, and so on. So to solve that, more motors and devices came in, which spread around quite a bit, and then tried lifting. But I should have realized that the problems with all the devices were that the main concern was that the exposure is not as good as conventional or traditional laparoscopic surgeries. But then obviously there were advantages which are physiological and also cost-wise and other things. But then even adding costs with the motorized devices did not really help the exposure. And most of the surgeries finished within an hour, 1.5 hours. And anyway, only about 10% of the surgeries all over the world are being done by laparoscopic surgeries. So the development sort of stopped with that. But one of the equipment which really took off for which other centers, more than one center, all the earlier things I was talking about are all single center studies. In other words, only one place is doing and publishing all these results. But then the first equipment which sort of spread to other centers was this device, Abdolift, designed by Dr. Daniel Kruszynski in Germany. he had a ring which lifted the abdominal wall. So the advantage is that the way it lifted the abdominal wall is sort of similar to how you would, gas will distend or lift the abdominal wall there. So, another advantage is that it lifted the half of the abdomen where we really need the lift, where we need the surgery. And the other half where probably we need not need it was not lifted by the device. So the device that we have been using is a modification of the original lift which is designed in Germany. So we have made several prototypes, about 6 or 7. So we have come up with a prototype which is, the ring is similar to the earlier one, which is passed in a small incision in the umbilicus. And then you can lift the whole anterior abdominal wall with that. And it is very easy to fix. See, the earlier devices, because they were doing in only 1 or 2 centers, they were not designed to do it quickly or use it many times. Only when they needed it, they used it. And there's only 1 center, and they had enough time to set up everything and do it. Even the abdo lift takes 10-15 minutes to get going. But then we made several changes which make the equipment get fixed, and we can start operating within less than 5 minutes. But you might ask that you're talking of a lot of advantages, and is there any disadvantages? Obviously, there is a disadvantage that otherwise this would have really taken off. The main disadvantage is that it is possible to do only in patients who are thin enough for use. The limiting factor, if you see, is the ring, the thickness of the ring. So the abdominal wall is very thick, then it's difficult to use. We need a much larger ring. So one of the constraints that we had was that sometimes when you're fixing the equipment, either omentum or intestines will come in between the ring and the abdominal wall. So we need to make sure that that doesn't happen. So we used to put your finger inside and sweep around and to make sure that there's no intestine which is caught between the abdominal wall and the ring. So that again was a limiting factor. So a large abdomen, we need a much bigger ring. So unfortunately, we didn't have a much bigger finger to use. So we had to stay with the same size. So it's comfortable to use till a BMI of about 28. And even those people who are learning these techniques have used for BMI up to 29, 30. But probably beyond that, it's very difficult to use. That's a disadvantage that we have. And this is a portion of the equipment which connects the ring to the operating table. So here, I don't know whether you can make out, there are two ball and socket joints, which allow movement in any sort of direction that we need. So all you need to do is keep the equipment in the right place. And just these two ball and socket joints can be fixed with these levers which are sticking out of the thing. So it's very easy to fix and very quick to fix. So I request, okay, one more slide. So this is the portion which fixes to the operating room, an operating table. There's a side railing in the operating table to which the equipment fixes. So here, when we had a difficulty because each hospital had a different type of table. Some about 100 years ago, some 10 years ago, some 30 years ago. And the thickness and size of the side railing varied. And that is the reason if you have a closer look, we have a V-shaped cut in the portion which fixes to the operating table. And some of them are not strong enough. So the whole apparatus used to bend. And to prevent that, we had a heavier, thicker portion which fixes the lift to the operating table. So now I request Kesu to share the video of how to fix these equipment.
While fixing the apparatus to the table, there are a few things which you need to note. One is that you need to rotate this lever to get the lift up and down. And very often we find that the arm board will interfere with this movement. So you have to make sure that it's sufficiently placed away from the arm board so that this movement is easily possible. In the newer model, we are trying to change it so that this lever can go to the other side. While fixing the lift, you need to notice or know about few important things. One is that the handle should move freely. Very often we find that the arm board interferes with the movement of the lift. So it should be sufficiently away from the arm board. And the other thing is there is a tendency to keep the lift at the lowermost position, which again makes it difficult to attach. So we keep it about a couple of inches from the lower position. Another mistake people make is that they don't keep it properly. It has to fit correctly like this. Otherwise, it can slip at any time. If we just leave it like this and then fix it, suddenly you will find it going down. That should not happen. So you have to fix it, make sure it goes correctly. The next thing is that it should fit correctly into the portion of the lift that is attached to the operating table. Sometimes it doesn't go in completely, and then the position can change during the operation. So once you make sure that it is correctly in position, unlock both the levers, which makes it really flexible, and then hold this portion. So we have to make sure that this portion is about 5-6 inches above the abdominal wall and about 1 or 2 inches below the level of the umbilicus. Once held in position, you need to lock it in position with these two levers. The levers are loosened and the lift is placed in the approximate place where it is desired, which is about 6 inches in front of the abdominal wall and about 2 inches below the umbilicus. So once you hold it in position, the assistant locks the two levers so that lift stays in place. And then once the abdominal portion is passed and fixed on here, it can be tightened, and after verifying, you can lift the whole apparatus so that the entire abdominal wall is lifted up. We start by holding the lower part of the umbilicus and lifting it up. And then we use a knife to make an incision. We make sure that the tip of the knife points upwards and cut through the umbilicus. These retractors, one of the important things to notice is that it is pulled downward and outward so that it exposes the rectus abdominis muscle, which is then incised transversely. Opened. Then we use a artery clamp to make sure that we enter the peritoneum nicely. And once we enter, we make sure that there is sufficient space to pass the finger and make sure there are no additions. You take that. Once inside the abdomen, sweep the finger to make sure that there is no ball. Then pass this, and this has to be pulled upwards and this here. And then once there is, make sure there are no additions. We hold the lower part of the incision with this S-shaped retractor, and the assistant holds the upper portion, and then we pass the ring. So first we lift the lower part of the incision like this, and then pass the ring just underneath the retractor, and then rotate it in anti-clockwise direction. This pulls the abdominal wall like this. Okay. And then again we can make sure that there are no intestines or omentum caught in between the ring and the abdominal wall. And once that is done, then it is fixed to this portion, and then surgeries are carried out. This is developed as a wound protector. We can use this as an umbilical port. We can just pass it inside, and this would keep it open, and there is no soiling of the instruments with the blood when we pass the instruments. The big advantage of this procedure is that open surgical instruments can be used, open suctions, gauze pieces for mopping, instruments could be passed one at a time, and all these are possible with the single incisions. A variety of surgeries are possible. While removing the device, the first step is to straighten the table back to its original position. Then it's loosened and removed by moving it in the clockwise direction. Sometimes you may have to use a forceps to pull out the wound protector. While closing, we use another important technique. What we do is, we first hold the upper flap with an Alice clamp and then lift it up. And then ask the assistant to hold it up. And then you can see the vectors here. And then we use the S-shaped retractor to expose the upper flap. Then we take a upper flap first using the retractor here, and then the assistant uses an artery clamp to pull the needle out or just hold the needle. Then when the retraction of the fat and skin exposes the lower flap, and both the threads are held up, and you go take the rectus on the lower side. But again you have to make sure that there are no intestines there, so you have to lift it, and once it goes in, your assistant relaxes and then pulls the needle out. The assistant pulls the needle out. Okay, now you can see the rectus, the superior edge here. Just take it out, and then once you take it, ask the assistant to relax and take it out. You can take out the Alice. Then we hold the retractor in this direction and then take few more sutures and tie it. No need to close the peritoneum, just the rectus. Okay. Then you tie first. Now we close the subcutaneous tissue also with the same suture, so that there is no need for skin suture, for which the patient has to come from a distance. It is a very cosmetically attractive option because the end results are very good, hardly a visible scar. So the patient acceptance is very good. It's a simple device to use. Surgeries are possible under spinal anesthesia, and it's low cost, thus taking the laparoscopic surgeries to the doorsteps of the patients in rural area.
So today we'll talk of how we can use this equipment to learn. So we are fortunate because of the project that we work with the University of Leeds to have a very good simulator which is manufactured by a company called Innovus. This is a simulator which the FLS program for the SAGES. SAGES is the American College of Gastrointestinal Surgeons, and they recommend use of this. And their finding is that all the people who want to do laparoscopic surgery, first they do certain tasks in these simulators. Once they become proficient, then they go and start doing laparoscopic surgeries. So don't worry if you don't have Innovus simulator. If you Google, especially in India, there are plenty of these training boxes or simulator which are available. The prices range from almost, the cheapest I've seen is about 12,000 Indian rupees, and it goes up to 75,000 Indian rupees. And the University of Leeds, the team, the biomedical engineering team, they helped us to design a training program. And they developed a simulator, which is almost when they compared with the Innovus. And their finding was that this is as good, if not better, than the Innovus simulator. And that could cost only about 5,000 or 6,000 rupees. And the advantage is that it's a very light one. So it's made a special type of cardboard, which is hard and very, very light. And it could be fixed in less than 10 minutes and can be connected to iPad or cell phone or any of those devices, and which you can use at a monitor. And now you might be wondering that, okay, unfortunately, I don't have any of these. I don't have Innovus. I can't buy anything because nobody is delivering all these things, even if I pay the money. And even though it's very good and low cost, we can't right now get the one man design that leads. So what he can do is he can do what we did earlier. So all you have to do is just find out one cardboard box and use two cell phones. If you see, I mean, here one cell phone, you can use it as a camera, and the other cell phone inside for providing light. So there is enough sufficient light, and also, I mean, the picture quality is good enough for you to practice. In fact, once in Mizoram, even when you go and operate in remote areas, we have a problem with the power supply. And because we knew that, we always take two generators. And both the generators failed. So we are doing appendicectomy. And when we had almost finished the surgery because we were not tied and removed the appendix. So I had to use the cell phone because we were doing a gasless, we were able to see the appendix through the cell phone. And we use a torchlight given as a light through the regular light cord. So even the actual surgeries are possible using a cell phone. So I mean, you can immediately start practicing. So what do we practice? See, the FLS course consists of these tasks which are given here. So first is the peg transfer. So what they say that you should be able to finish the transfer in 300 seconds if you have the thing. If you don't have it, it doesn't matter. As I said, I mean, I'll show you. We can use the normal needle and thread. I mean, the thread and thread holder for using it. And then next task they gave us precision cutting. So the peg transfer, what it does is the main problem for people who don't do laparoscopy surgery is that you see the pictures in 2 dimensions. And the action that you need to carry is actually in 3 dimensions. So you need to learn how to convert 2D pictures into 3D actions. And the peg transfer is the one which really helps you to master the skill. You can go and comfortably do the other things once you are happy with the peg transfer. So that is the first thing you need to practice, and you need to spend a lot of time practicing that. Then the FLS has the other task of precision cutting. So they give a sheet like this and they draw a mark and you need to cut around it. Then they teach you how to do extracorporeal knotting, and then later on suturing and intracorporeal knotting. These are the standards or the tasks that you need to practice using a simulator. So now what do we do if you don't have a regular simulator? If you have one, for peg transfer, that is the ideal thing. If you don't have one, as you can see on the right hand corner, you use ordinary needles, and they generally come, if you buy a pack of them, they come with these holders, which look similar to the peg transfer, the poles in the peg transfer equipment. So you can practice that using these ordinary needle and thread and the thread holder. And FLS, they ask you to use 2 Marylands. But if you want to save on money, you need to have 1 Maryland and 1 needle holder. That is sufficient. And you need to pick up the peg with one hand, transfer it to the other hand, and then place it. So once you become proficient, so normally you start, if your dominant hand in the right hand, you have the needle holder in the right hand. Then pick up the Maryland. So you need to realize that you need to first take it out and then bring it closer to you, then hold with the other instrument and then go and place it. So all these things, you convert the 2D image that you have into a 3D action, which takes a little practice to learn. So, and once you're proficient with that, you pick up the Maryland, transfer to the needle holder, and place it to the other empty slot. So then you can do the opposite, pick up with the needle holder, transfer it to the Maryland, and do it. Because then you are trying to place it with the non-dominant hand. That is a little more difficult to do that. And then you can practice also the thing. You can practice holding it in different places and so on. So that this is a skill which you really need to practice. So the next one you need to practice is the tying. So you need to. This slide will show you how to do the roder's knot, fisherman's knot, which you can tie outside, and you push it, and then we'll give you a link to how to make this. The knot pusher with the old DJ stand, the used one. And easy thing to practice is that you put a gloves, and the fingers of the gloves, you can use it for tying. And you can fill the gloves a little bit with either cotton or gauze piece or something to make it stiff, and it gives a feeling that it is something like an appendix. So you can really practice doing appendicectomies like extracorporeal knotting and tying.
During gasless appendicectomies, there are two ways of knotting. The one way is to do like this. You take a Prolene suture and take a simple knot. Then go around once or twice like this. Okay. And then you go around the entire loop like this. Then you pass through this loop and pull out the thread. And while tightening, you just open it out. This acts like a fisherman's knot. Okay, so we can, it's easy to sort of push the knot around. So this knot is ready. Then what we do is, we pass it through a pusher. Cut off the needle, and it's better to do it in a place which is straight, which doesn't have the memory, and then pass it through the pusher that is used for double J stenting. Okay. Now the low cost loop is ready for use. So what we do is, during surgery, if this is appendix, you catch the tip, and after dissection, you can pass it inside. Okay, and use this to tighten, and then you can take it out and use a laparoscopic scissors to cut off. This is one way of doing it. The other way is to use this pusher.
Here again, the technique is simple. Holding both the threads, make a simple knot. Then holding both the threads in one hand, use the pusher to push the knot inside. Once you take the pusher out, tie the next knot and repeat the steps. In case of any difficulty, ask an assistant to hold one of the ends.
Okay. This actually slide will gives a little bit how the two types of the pushes, not pushes look. And the commercial one is the one which is usually found at the bottom. It has two poles and connecting rod, and you can use it for pushing. The other one for pushing, the roder's knot, fisherman's knot, will be made actually with the steam pin. We just flattened the pin and made a cut. So we just put it in and then push it in. And this is, there are a few videos I think which will show a little bit later about how to tie the knots intercorporeally. Actually, this slide actually shows how to tie a knot using a single incision. We have different methods of 3-4 methods of knot tying, which is a very important skill if you want to do a little advanced surgeries which necessitate suturing. And these are also can easily be done with the single incision. In fact, many of them we started doing them only now because we have enough time to work on those other things. One of the skills that we need to learn is to do suturing. So the first thing you need to learn in suturing is how to hold the needle. You just pick it up, keep it in the right direction, and then if you just press and hold, that usually holds in the correct place. Then you hold the tissue that you want to suture. First take one edge, then the other edge. Okay. Then you can, ideally you should turn it and hold the needle. Release the needle holder. And it's a good idea to hold on to the tissues while pulling it. But here it's maybe a little difficult because it has a larger needle. So once you do that, so first thing is to pull the thread towards the camera. And then hold the thread perpendicular, hold the Maryland perpendicular. You can go in one loop. Yet again, make sure that the thread is towards the camera. Then go with both instruments. Hold the shorter thread. So this is the surgeon's knot. Okay. In the other one, you can either do it this way or the other way. So the basic idea is to form a loop, go in, catch the thread, and then tie it. Okay. Once you tied it, again you hold the needle. Then you pass the needle through. Then pull so that it falls correctly. This is a little difficult to pull, especially if the needle turns in some other way, because the eye of the needle is larger. Atraumatic sutures, that won't be a problem. We are using atrium in these needles because they're cheaper and we can reuse them. Okay, now we come to a stage where you want to tie these knots. There are several ways of doing it. If there is sufficient length, then you can tie them the usual way. Okay. Sometimes what happens is that the length may not be sufficient. Then you can use the other methods of tying, like hold the shorter thread. Then you can just pass the needle around it twice. Then tie it. Or you can try the other way of knotting, which we learned for single incision. Another way of doing it is to hold the center of the needle, pull the thread towards you, towards the camera that is. Then go twice around. So this forms a loop. Then you hold the needle. Then you can tie it. So these are things we can do when there is insufficient length of the thread for tying. But if there is a standard length, then you tie the standard way. So this is a very useful skill to learn. And then finally, you cut off the thread. So while cutting the thread, it's good to keep the thread taut. Go with the scissors closed, open, turn the scissors, and then cut. See, one other thing you need to realize is that once you understand the concept of how these knots are made, it is very easy to sort of do it. So basically, I don't know whether you can see it. You need to, once they have a thread, form a loop like this and push the needle holder or something, and then hold the other end and pick it up. So very often the loop, as a slide shows, it falls in the correct way. So then it'll be one thread will be above, and if you just pass it, it'll come off. So you need to flip it over and then pass the needle holder so that a loop forms and you can tie the knot. Another way of doing it is to hold, say, either the long end. If you hold the needle, if you're using, then you can just rotate the needle holder once or twice, you form the loop, and then hold the other shorter thread with the needle holder. Or even simpler is holding the shorter thread with the left hand instrument and use the right hand instrument to pass the thread 2-3 times and then pull it. If you look at the videos, you'll understand how easy it is to do it. If you practice, we have time, and if you practice for half an hour a day, you can really become proficient with these methods. There are many methods. I don't think I'll go into the details right now. And the next skill that you need to develop is suturing. So the easy thing to do is to just pass a gauze piece across the simulator, and then you can suture it. Many, even FLS, they suture in a straight line. They keep it sort of perpendicular to the place where you want to suture. But most of the time in the reality, you need to suture the opposite way, like this, rather than suture in this direction. So it is good to practice suturing, placing a gauze piece across the simulator, and that will help you practice knotting, and it'll help you practice suturing, and also the various ways in which you can do the knotting. And what we show for single incision knotting can be done more comfortably if we use 2 ports, multiple ports. So one of the things we need to know while suturing is that when you take the needle out of the tissue where you're suturing, that is the ideal time to hold the needle in the right position. It's, I mean, unlike open surgery, holding the needle, it's a little difficult task in laparoscopic surgery. So there are various methods of doing. You can hold the thread, let it hang in the right angle, then catch it, or hold the thing and then towards you and catch it. So one of the things which you can practice is that first do it under direct vision with the laparoscopy instruments, and then slowly, once you're confident of the position and how it looks, then you start doing it in the simulator. That helps quite a bit. And the best thing is to catch it when it comes out of the tissue, because you've gone in the correct angle and the correct direction. Then that is the best time to hold it and pull it out and do the knotting and suturing. And this is, these are low-cost equipment. Gauze is always available, and you can use not a atraumatic needle. You can use an ordinary needle, which you can, an ordinary thread, which you can multiple times use it, and every day you can do suturing, practice suturing 2 or 3 times also. Then coming to precision cutting. So here also this method I think is even better than the one given by the FLS. All you need to do is pack gloves with the gauze piece and draw where you want to cut. And then you can cut along the place that you are drawn. This will give you additional, in addition to the regular way you're cutting where you want to cut, it gives a depth perception also, because it's not uniform. While the commercial one which they sell is, it's easy to, once you learn how to do it, it's very easy to do it because it's in the same plane. For dissecting, what we had done is put some patches over Velcro, and that also you can slowly learn how to dissect and cut. So thanks for joining this lecture. And again, I would like to stress the fact that even if you don't have a simulator or a box, all you need is a cardboard box, 2 cell phones, and 2 instruments. Even if you don't have an instrument, you can always take an open needle holder and open instruments, like a long Kelly, and practice these skills. And it's a big advantage to patients in rural areas. And you don't need very expensive equipment, because you can either use old ports which are damaged because there's no problem about gas leak and so on. Even if you don't have a ports, you can use that the suction tubing. They can cut it and make it into small ports. And it's much more minimally invasive than the regular laparoscopy surgeries also. And most of the surgeries are possible with this. And now we have, especially from Northeast India, we have about 5 or 6 rural surgeons who are regularly doing it. There's one of the surgeons in the last couple of months, he had done about 30 cholecystectomies with this. We started doing hernia surgery with this, appendix, most of the pelvic surgeries. So all these are possible with gastric laparoscopic surgeries. And it can make a big difference to the patients in rural areas. If you like to, if we have any questions, we can answer a few of them, or we can stop, because we're already 6 or 7 minutes past the scheduled time.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes.
Just one question. Do we always have to make the entry from the umbilicus, or supposing we have a big fibroid or a big uterus, do we have to, change our entry port side from the umbilicus a little higher up, or do we stick to the umbilicus only?
See, most of the time,
like in
so
gas
far,
surgery, no, just let me come. Just like in gas surgery, we change our primary port, the optical port, with the level of pelvic organ. Okay, if the organ is big, we go slightly higher up. Does the same thing work with gastric surgery?
Yeah, that's exactly the same. In fact, sometimes laparoscopic cholecystectomies in CMC Vellore, because they were doing it on quite hefty patients, they put the port a little higher, the camera port.
Okay.
And anyway, when one more instrument can actually be passed along with the one or two more instruments, in fact, can pass in the same
Can be passed
in port
in
of
the camera ports.
incision.
Yeah.
So it actually means less number of ports and incisions.
Correct. Correct. At least it decreases one port definitely.
Yeah,
One ancillary port is at least decreased.
yeah,
No, at number of working port decreases, no, because you take in gasless surgery, you take advantage of the central port and put your instruments inside.
yeah. And another advantage
Yeah.
is that you can put one instrument at a time. So you can pass
Yeah.
the two instruments, then introduce a camera, and you can use a huge open suction. You can put gauze pieces inside and pack it. So a lot of advantages. Anyway, thanks for people from Kenya and Uganda and Nigeria who joined. And if you'd like more of these lectures, please write to us and we can prepare and we can, Keso can arrange all these things.